Everybody, welcome to what might be the last episode of the Kosher Intuitive in 2025. If I can pump out another episode before the year's end, I definitely will. This is your favorite Detroit investment realtor, which is not why you're here. Clairvoyant, intuitive, energy, high level healer, and life coach Yael Meisels extraordinaire, and or comedian Yael Meisels, but I am definitely a life coach. Anyway, so it is December 22nd, and they say for the Jews and the Christians, this is the most wonderful time of the year. Is it though? We're going to talk about it today on the Kosher Intuitive. And I am also going to share some of the lessons that I personally am taking away and taking with me into the new year. Um, for starters, for those of you, one of the reasons this show has been on a hiatus for a couple of months, and I'll just be honest, my 3-year relationship did come to an end. And it is so devastating, especially being on the other side of 40, to have been like, oh shit, how in the hell did something like this happen? But we have to remember that God runs the world, and not everything we want is what's best for us. And I can only hope that was the situation for me and the gentleman I was with on and off for a duration of 3 years. But, they say that this is the most wonderful time of the year, but however, the suicide rates are through the roof. People are lonely, people are sad, and it's something that we're going to talk about today on the Kosher Intuitive. Because I really needed to take some time after my breakup and just kind of regroup and just get my head together. Like, I'm finally in a place where I'm ready to even like have the conversation of somebody else in my life. And I feel like this time of year, for those of us who are single, the silence is so loud. You know what I mean? Um, and I think of all of the things, that I've done in my life, that I wonder, if I wasn't single, would I have done these things? And the answer is probably not. Um, but it's a part of our choices and living our life to the fullest and those things that we absolutely have to do. And I found that I can't change the world around me, but I can change myself and I can change how I react to a situation. The first thing I want to touch on today is, you know, people ask me all the time, how do I get out of this cycle, right? How do I stop meeting people that are going to act like this? How do I stop going through things that are going to be like that? Well, the answer is simple. And I did this in my own life. And I'll be honest with you, it's sad. It's hard. What I'm suggesting is not at all an easy endeavor, but we have to take a look at the people that God or listen, I'm not even going to call a creation of the creator. The universe is a creation of God. Anyway, when God is like sending us these situations that we know don't service us, and this is something that kept me in the wrong relationship for 3 years. I'm going to tell you the honest to God truth. I am sure self-esteem had something to do with how I found myself in a relationship where there was a high level of emotional neglect for 3 years. Um, I kept believing the changes this person said they would make, but at the end of the day, I'm 41, he was 51. Can you change at 51? I don't know. He couldn't. So, we have to take a look at the patterns that are being sent to us. And when these patterns are just not what we need, and we know that, we then have to pick ourselves all the way up off the floor and what's the word I'm looking for? And turn it down. And you got to do this again and again until you have just broken this pattern. Because the more we accept bad behavior, shitty behavior, neglectful behavior, aloof behavior, the more we accept this from our partnerships, the more we're going to get this, not only from our partnerships, not only from that partnership, but we're going to get it from every partnership when we are not valuing what we bring to the table. I had to take a look at my relationship and say, okay, you want a kid? All right, why? I mean, and I know that might sound like such a shitty thing to say to somebody, right? Like, who am I to ask this man, why do you want a kid? Well, when someone has a habitual pattern of working 70 to 80 hours a week, and this is their regular schedule, the question, which was the schedule of the gentleman that I was with on and off for 3 years, you have to ask yourself, well, in all of this time that you're going to be working, where does the parenting for this said child come in, right? And once we started having those conversations and having the hard conversations about where the future was going, I realized the future was going nowhere. I realized that I had backpedaled in what I need for myself. Um, you know, I had backpedaled in what I need for myself, and I had to really take a look at it because back in September, it was kind of like do or die, and I'm glad it died and it didn't do because it would have been a third divorce in Mexico. Not a good look. And the relationship was giving Mexican divorce vibes. He was from Mexico City. That's why. Um, but you know, this was a person who could not break these patterns. These are the patterns that have kept this individual single into his 50s. You know what I'm saying? Um, and one of the reasons I always keep my who I'm dating private, especially who I'm in a serious relationship with private, is because I do stuff like this. If the relationship doesn't work, I then take that lesson and feed it to my podcast. You know what I'm saying? So this is another, it's just kind of something I do to protect everybody's privacy. But when the world isn't giving us what we want in a relationship, we really have to open our eyes and ask the question of why. And I had to ask myself earlier this year, am I the person I want to be? There's a song by Chris Brown called Residuals, and one of the verses in the song is that I lace you up just to watch you run away. And that really hit me because I heard the song on the radio for like one of the handfuls of times in the car I listened to the radio. And I almost thought like this is God talking to me because in this relationship, this man inspired me to lose 70 pounds out of just sheer willpower and in kindness. But when it came to an interpersonal caring for you on a daily basis and giving me what my girl, like, I want to be clear, this guy wasn't abusive, he wasn't nasty, but at the end of the day, it was 3 years of, at the end of the day, it was 3 years of me trying to I feel like to some degree squish a square peg into a round hole. And because there was a distance with the fact that this was a long distance relationship, I live in Detroit. This gentleman lived in Mexico City. I'm going to tell you guys something. Before I ever got into life coaching, most people who followed my career actually know this, but before I got into coaching, I was a dating coach for out of the 22 years I've been coaching, I want to say it was in the last 7 that I've like focused on life coaching specifically and not just setting people up, like the last 7 or 8, where I kind of shifted from being a dating coach matchmaker into an intuitive energy clearing, healer and life coach. I realized I should be using my energy healing capabilities for a living, which is basically almost like how I make my entire living now. But I realized that, at least in the Jewish world, these men are so hard to please. They're so hard to please. The women who've given up and gone for non-Jewish dudes, totally don't blame you, by the way. Just because I haven't done it and won't do it doesn't mean that I don't appreciate why the women who do it do it. I No argument here, boo. That's between you and the Lord, not between you, the Lord, and Yael. And I firmly understand why in the dating crisis that we're presently in, why people would say to hell with their religious convictions and, say when it comes to a partner, I'll do me, you do you. And for some people that actually does work. Um, it's kind of interesting because I was talking to a rabbi last year and I brought this up, that I know couples where one party is an Orthodox Jew, one party is a secular Jew, or one party is Jewish and, to some degree religious while the other party isn't Jewish at all. And the rabbi tried to stump me and say, oh, what's the success rate? And I said, higher than you would think, because the dating situation right now is such a crisis. People across the board are having such a hard time finding somebody that we have we have to almost get down to the crux of what's important and say, well, what is important? You know what I mean? It happened to be the gentleman that I recently parted ways with was one of the many things he does for a living was being a dayan, right? A religious judge. And I mean, he was religiously where I needed him to be, but everything else he totally sucked at. Everything else. And this was not somebody, I need to make so clear. Like, this wasn't somebody who was yelling at me, talking dirty, or talking down to me, but belittling me. Nothing like that. Because it doesn't have to, like, you don't have to act like that for something to just organically not work. You know what I mean? Nobody has to act a fool. Nobody, and this is if you're two healthy people, attracting a healthy relationship. Like what I mentioned, we actually officially ended the relationship on Halloween. So when I finally started telling the people in my life, you know, I'm single again, and, I didn't want to do that right away just because this gentleman and I have had, and it's kind of funny because on Halloween, it was almost like he agreed with me that we shouldn't be together anymore. And that song by Taylor Swift? We are never, ever, ever getting back together. Yeah, so we are like never getting back together, like ever. Okay. But in the beginning of it, I was like, should I tell people in the event that this breakup is temporary, right? Like the others have been. The others have been temporary. And I had to really get down to the crux of it and say, well, shit, Yal, do you want this relationship back? because I had to get real with myself. I said, I'm sure I could probably make 2 to 4 calls, right? And get this dude back if that was really what was best for me or best for our situation. And I decided after about a week and a half post breakup, you know what? I'm going to tell everybody because it was so, it was such, it was so clear that our biggest draw to one another was I'm available, you're available. But like we could never bring it full circle. You know what I mean? It was truly something I feel almost like just killed time, truly did. Um, and these are things that we have to learn from. And, there's since my breakup with this individual, um, I decided what can I work on, right? Because I'm not trying to sound like a pompous asshole, but I did everything right in this relationship. I did everything right. And when the relationship didn't work and I found myself single again and I started going through like my mental lexicon of like, well, what are things about myself that I could improve with? And I realized that as much as I do intuitive prayer meditations, I was lacking in doing basic Jewish prayers. And, I've only been back on the Shema wagon in the morning for the last few weeks, and back on the Shema wagon at night, for the last couple of weeks. But I do see a shift in the things that are coming my way. And it's so interesting because there's a safer I'm going to share with you. This actually, is it upstairs? Oh, never mind. It's not upstairs. It's downstairs. I'm not going to go downstairs right now. But it's a prayer book called Anani. And well, first of all, there's just beautiful prayers in there all over the place. But there's a beautiful prayer for men looking for wives. There's a prayer for women looking for a husband. And I decided, since there was nothing, what's the word I'm looking for? Since there was nothing that I could say, okay, you did this wrong, or you were argumentative, or this, because that just wasn't the case. Like, I'll be honest with you. I'm not an argumentative person. If someone starts it, I will shut it down. I will shut it down aggressively, should that be necessary. Anybody who knows me knows I have an authoritative tone. I put up with no bullshit. And shenanigans just don't fly here. As part of the reason why 3 years into a relationship I ended it. Shenanigans do not fly here. So when it became clear, that I don't have anything else to fix, maybe the issue is spiritual. Maybe it isn't a rational thing going on. Because when we've covered all of our rational bases, that's when it's time to start ticking the spiritual boxes and say, am I doing everything spiritually to lead myself in a direction where God is going to want to bless me with my highest and best, match? And am I willing to do the work? Because sometimes it's really just about watching to see, well, where are you willing to improve? And when I saw at 41 years old that I'm coming out of, quite possibly the most serious adult relationship I've had in my life, you know, yeah, I'm going to look for, this didn't result in a marriage. You better believe I'm going to look and see where could I have improved. When I spend essentially 3 years with the wrong person, oh, you bet your ass I'm going to look through myself and see the when, why, when, when and how this went wrong. And that's where like being brutally honest with ourselves actually comes in. Where I took a look at everything I've done wrong in this relationship, which wasn't a lot. Um, as opposed to other relationships, I'll be honest, it wasn't a lot. In fact, when this gentleman and I broke up, he actually, you guys are going to laugh, he was pissed because in our 3-year relationship, he was pissed off at me twice. Twice in 3 years. Homie was pissed twice. All right. Most of us get pissed 10 times a day. All right. I know people that get pissed at their husband, their wife, their girlfriend, their boyfriend twice a day, 3 times a day, 4 times a week. And it resonated with me that this was someone who looked at the entirety of the situation and said, in 2 years, or 3 years, excuse me, I've been mad at you twice. And that was like one of his fundamental reasons for not wanting. And I'm like, whoa, that is such a reason for me to leave, because fucking hell, if you expect to never be mad, how are you ever going to live? Right, Steve? My ex-boyfriend got mad at me twice in 3 years. Steve, you've been married for God knows how long. How many times has your wife been mad at you? And if you've been mad at her, I can bet it's been more than twice. It's like, give me a fucking break. Like, when you think your feathers are too pious or whatever, righteous to be ruffled, you're out of your fucking mind at that point. Okay? You're out of your fucking mind at that point. And I'm not going to be one of those people that are like, love yourself. No, fuck you. Loving yourself doesn't replace a husband. It doesn't replace the support of a spouse. Okay? It doesn't. I love myself plenty. I am one of the smartest people I've ever even known. As a person with rare phenomena, I probably know, I'm not even trying to be an asshole right now, I probably know more than you do about most topics. Seriously. I just have an incredibly high IQ. I learn things like that. I pick up one piece of information and I get the whole pie. That's just how my brain works. And also, I can't believe I've never made it on any spectrums. Um, my psychiatrist, my therapist, like, have laughed at me when I've like even suggested maybe I'm autistic, and they're like, "You are so not autistic." Um, but people with rare phenomena, we see like the entirety of the picture, and it's when I truly think that I closed my eyes to certain things that were bothersome to me for like the sake of the greater good. Like, it didn't make sense to start that fight. Like, don't ruffle that feather. Like, and again, this wasn't an aggressive or nasty person, but it's like, I'm a people pleaser. I know how to be aggressive, but I'm also a people pleaser. That's how you can date me 3 years and be mad twice. I'm naturally a people pleaser. Anyway, um, I just think that as we go into the new year, we have to be so real with who we are. I don't believe in New Year's resolutions, whether your New Year's is a Rosh Hashanah in the fall or whether your New Year's is, January 1st in the winter. It really doesn't matter. I am not a believer in New Year's resolutions because I look at it like this. You're going to make that change permanently, whatever that change is, once you've hit rock bottom. What is rock bottom, right? Let's just review for a second what rock bottom is. Rock bottom is the day that you decide the things that you have done up until this point haven't worked. And rock bottom in any situation is the day you change and say, I accept, that this path is not the path, and or that path isn't the path. And instead of going left, I'm going to go right. Instead of going right, I'm going to go left or go forward, whatever the case may be. Rock bottom is the day we change. And I know how hard it is to be on the other side of 35, the other side of 40, and still single. I've been divorced 13 years. I never would have believed I'd be single for the entirety of my children's lives up until this point. You know what I mean? I shouldn't even say up until this point. I'm still single. Um, I'd like to not be single, but I am still single. And I've realized that my best hope at not being single is when someone does come into my life, be very real with what I'm offering them and what they're offering me. And just something to keep in the loop is most of the people who watch this show happen to be religious Jewish people who date the way that I do, where we're dating for a specific purpose to lead it to marriage. And I had 3 stop and goes because this relationship wasn't 3 consecutive years, which doesn't really exist in the Jewish community. It's not supposed to anyway. Um, where we would get to that point, is engagement going to happen? We'd get to that point again, is engagement going to happen? So when I saw that the relationship was developing into a total everyday coexistence reality, he couldn't handle that. And I gave him 3 chances. That's my fault. You got me? So we have to be smarter. We have to know what doesn't work. We have to remember what didn't work. And we have to be in mindful of the fact that even if we don't know what does work, we know what doesn't. So don't do the shit that you already know doesn't work. That is our podcast for the possibly the last podcast of 2025. If I have time to hop on and do another one, listen, y'all, we've got so much to talk about. The anti-Semitism bullshit is through the roof. I'm not made this shit just be wiped out of creation. The leftists, the dem, you guys, listen, anybody who watches this show or knows me personally or knows me as a comedian knows I'm not a political person. All right? I'm not. I do not identify solely either as a Republican or a Democrat. I don't identify with either party because there's Democratic values that I agree with. There's Republican values that I agree with. And when you have mirroring, when you have, I don't agree with everything the right does. I definitely don't agree with everything the left side does. So it's like I fall somewhere in the middle. But like what we have seen Democrats do recently, especially with the Somali fraud, oh geez. Like wrath of God all over that situation. Wrath of God for the evil, wicked, and stupid. It's time for us to live without this shit. Wishing everyone a beautiful winter solace, a beautiful last day of Hanukkah, and a very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. It is again clairvoyant, intuitive energy healer, and life coach Yael Meisels. And if anybody wants to donate to this cause, please do. I don't know if I have said this before. I know that I have, but I need you guys to understand. This business, the Kosher Intuitive, does thousands of free work and discounts a year for people in need of help. I don't know another energy healer, especially one anywhere near my level, who does that. All right. If you feel so inclined to donate to this cause, please do so. You can reach me on any one of the socials. My email, yaelmeisels@gmail.com, and I will give you the links. Listen, we do so much life-saving good work at this company. I wish there was just a camera to follow what I do, the group, what my team does. Um, we are literally living for wellness, and it is an honor to do that. So if you feel inclined to donate, please do. If you'd like to make a tax-deductible donation, that can be arranged. Thank you again for listening. Thank you for watching. God bless you. And since we are in the last day of the season of miracles for the miracles of Hanukkah, my strongest prayer for myself and for all of us is that God see the things in our life that we need, that we want, and that will just bring us into our highest level of being. And may God bless each and every one of us with the miracles that we need to live our highest and most accomplished and best and happiest and holiest self. Thank you so much. I wish you guys a wonderful day. Be well.